The chalk snapped in Mr. Harrington's grip as he spun toward the back of the classroom, his voice slicing through the silence. "Mr. Chen, since you seem to think my teaching methods are beneath your attention, perhaps you'd like to solve this equation for the entire class." 30 heads whipped around to stare at Elijah Chen, a thin 17-year-old with worn sneakers and a faded hoodie, who had been scribbling in his notebook rather than following the standard solution on the whiteboard. Mr. Harrington stormed down the aisle, snatched Elijah's notebook and held it up like evidence at a trial, revealing pages of strange symbols and unconventional mathematical notations. "What is this gibberish? This isn't mathematics, this is doodling." Laughter rippled through the classroom as Elijah's face burned red. The teacher slapped a piece of chalk into Elijah's palm and pointed to a complex differential equation he'd written on the board, one far beyond what they'd covered in class. "Solve it. Now, show us all what your special method can do." The classroom fell silent as Elijah stood frozen at the board, chalk trembling in his hand, while Mr. Harrington folded his arms with a smug smile. "As I thought. Perhaps next time you'll pay attention instead of wasting everyone's time with your made-up formulas." The teacher turned to the class with theatrical disappointment. "This, students, is what happens when you think you're smarter than centuries of established mathematical principles." Elijah stared at the equation, his shoulders hunched under the weight of 30 pairs of eyes and the crushing silence of public humiliation. "Where are you listening from, and what time is it there right now? Let me know in the comments. I'd love to see how far this story is reaching." Elijah Chen hadn't always been the quiet kid in the back of the classroom. 3 years ago, he'd been a bright-eyed freshman, with his hand perpetually in the air, eager to share his passion for numbers and patterns. That was before his father lost his engineering job during company-wide layoffs, before his mother had to take on double shifts at the hospital as a nurse's aide, before their family of 4 was crammed into a 1-bedroom apartment on the edge of town. Now, at 17, Elijah woke up at 4:30 each morning to help his 9-year-old sister, May, get ready for school before catching the 5:45 bus across town, the only way he could remain at Westridge High after they'd had to move. The apartment was quiet when Elijah returned home that afternoon, his cheeks still burning from the morning's humiliation. He dropped his backpack by the door and headed straight for the kitchen table, his makeshift desk, since they'd sold most of their furniture. Spread across the surface were dog-eared library books on advanced mathematics, borrowed university textbooks, and notebooks filled with his own notations. Mathematics had become Elijah's refuge, the one place where the chaos of his life made sense. While his classmates followed the standard curriculum, Elijah had been teaching himself university-level concepts, developing his own approach to solving complex problems, an intuitive method that didn't always follow conventional steps. "You're home early," his mother said, appearing in the doorway, still wearing her pale blue scrubs, dark circles under her eyes from her overnight shift. She noticed his slumped shoulders immediately. "What happened?" Elijah shrugged, not wanting to burden her with school problems when she was already carrying so much. "Just Mr. Harrington being Mr. Harrington." He forced a smile. "How's Dad's job search going?" His mother's expression told him everything. Another rejection. His father, once respected in his field, had been struggling to find work for months. Age discrimination wasn't something you could prove easily, but at 53, interview callbacks had become increasingly rare. The weight of his family's financial strain pressed down on Elijah's shoulders. The scholarship to MIT he'd been dreaming about since childhood now seemed like their only hope for a better future. Later that evening, as May slept on the pull-out couch they shared, Elijah sat cross-legged on the floor, a small lamp illuminating his notebook. His fingers traced over the equations Mr. Harrington had mocked. These weren't random doodles. They were the culmination of 2 years of independent study, a mathematical approach that combined elements of calculus and computational theory in ways his teacher couldn't understand. Elijah had discovered that certain classes of differential equations could be solved through a visual mapping technique he'd developed, reducing complex calculations to elegant pattern recognition, A text message lit up his phone screen. It was from Zoe, one of the few classmates who still talked to him after he'd become the scholarship kid who couldn't afford to go to parties or school events. "You okay? Harrington was brutal today." Elijah stared at the message, unsure how to respond. How could he explain that Mr. Harrington's humiliation wasn't just about math, it was about everything? About feeling invisible in a school where success was measured by the car you drove and the clothes you wore. About watching his brilliant father reduced to filling out applications at fast food restaurants. About knowing that his unconventional approach to mathematics, the one thing he excelled at, was dismissed as worthless by the very person whose recommendation he needed for his scholarship application. He finally typed back, "I'm fine. Just need to focus on the math league. Competition next week. The annual state competition was offering a $5,000 prize to the winner, money that could help his family keep their apartment for a few more months." But Mr. Harrington was the faculty advisor for the math league, and after today's confrontation, Elijah wondered if he'd even be allowed to compete. Closing his eyes, Elijah leaned his head against the wall. The equation Mr. Harrington had written on the board floated in his mind. He could solve it, he knew he could, using his own method. But proving it meant standing up to the most intimidating teacher at Westridge High, risking not just further humiliation, but potentially his entire future. As the sounds of the city filtered through the thin apartment walls, Elijah made a decision. Tomorrow he would show Mr. Harrington exactly what his gibberish could do. The next morning, Elijah arrived early to find a notice pinned to the Math League bulletin board. Final team selection for state competition. Today, 3:15 p.m., room 237. His stomach tightened. Mr. Harrington had moved up the selection date by 2 weeks, giving no prior warning. This wasn't coincidence, it was calculated. As students filtered into first-period calculus, Elijah noticed Mr. Harrington watching him with a satisfied smile that didn't reach his eyes. "Before we begin today's lesson," Mr. Harrington announced, straightening his tie, "I'd like to address yesterday's disruption." His gaze locked onto Elijah. "Mathematical rigor requires discipline and respect for established methodologies. Those who believe they can reinvent centuries of mathematical tradition might be better suited for creative writing class." Scattered laughter rippled through the room as Elijah sank lower in his seat. "To ensure everyone understands the importance of proper technique, today's quiz will count for 15% of your final grade." Murmurs of protest rose from the class, but Mr. Harrington silenced them with a raised hand. "Consider it motivation to pay attention." He began distributing papers, pausing at Elijah's desk. "Mr. Chen, I've prepared a special version for you. Since you believe conventional methods are beneath you, I thought you might appreciate a more challenging approach." He placed a different quiz on Elijah's desk, one filled with graduate-level problems far beyond the standard curriculum. Elijah stared at the paper, his heart pounding. This wasn't just unfair, it was impossible. Around him, students had already begun working on their regular quizzes. He raised his hand. "Mr. Harrington, these problems, are you saying you can't solve them?" Mr. Harrington interrupted loudly enough for everyone to hear. "Perhaps your special method isn't as revolutionary as you thought." The teacher leaned closer, lowering his voice. "You have two options, Mr. Chen. Complete this quiz using standard methods I've taught, or accept a 0. Your choice." The classroom fell silent as students pretended not to listen. Elijah looked down at the impossible quiz, then at the clock. 40 minutes to solve problems that would challenge doctoral candidates. His scholarship application required a perfect GPA. A 0 would destroy everything he'd worked for. "One more thing," Mr. Harrington added, returning to his desk. "I've decided that today's Math League selection will be based on an open problem-solving demonstration. Each candidate will solve problems on the board while the rest of the team observes. Those who demonstrate proper technique will represent Westridge at the state competition." His eyes found Elijah's. "Those who don't, won't." The message was clear. Use Mr. Harrington's methods or be cut from the team. For Elijah, the Math League wasn't just an extracurricular activity. It was his best chance at impressing scholarship committees. The $5,000 prize money could help his family stay afloat while his father continued searching for work. Without it, they might not make next month's rent. During lunch, Elijah sat alone, methodically working through the impossible quiz problems in his notebook. His unconventional approach allowed him to visualize solutions that standard methods couldn't easily reach, but Mr. Harrington would never accept them. Zoe slid into the seat across from him, pushing her salad aside. "He's trying to break you," she said quietly. "Everyone can see it." Elijah nodded without looking up. "I know. Why don't you just do it his way? Just for now, until competition season is over." Elijah finally raised his eyes. "Because he's wrong, Zoe. These methods, my methods, they work. They're faster, more intuitive. In some cases, they're the only way to solve certain problems." He closed his notebook. "If I give in now, everything I've worked on for 2 years means nothing." As the final bell rang, Elijah made his way to room 237, where 12 other Math League hopefuls had already gathered. Mr. Harrington stood at the front, a stack of problem cards in his hand and a whiteboard marker twirling between his fingers. His eyes narrowed when Elijah entered. "Mr. Chen, I was beginning to think you wouldn't join us." He gestured to the empty seat in the front row. "I've saved you a special place. You'll be our final demonstrator today." The other students shifted uncomfortably, aware they were witnessing something beyond a simple team selection. "After all," Mr. Harrington continued with a cold smile, "we should give our most innovative thinkers the spotlight they deserve." Elijah took the seat, feeling the weight of what was coming. This wasn't just about math anymore. It was a public execution of his academic future. As the first student approached the board, Elijah opened his notebook to a blank page and began preparing for the battle ahead. One by one, the Math League candidates approached the whiteboard, solved their assigned problems, and returned to their seats. Some struggled, others breezed through, but all followed Mr. Harrington's approved methodologies to the letter. With each successful demonstration, the knot in Elijah's stomach tightened. The clock on the wall ticked mercilessly toward his turn, each minute bringing him closer to a moment that could determine his entire future. "Mr. Chen," Mr. Harrington finally called, his voice carrying a note of anticipation that made several students exchange uncomfortable glances. "Your turn." The room fell silent as Elijah stood. His legs felt leaden as he approached the whiteboard. Aware of 11 pairs of eyes following his every move, Mr. Harrington held out a stack of problem cards, a thin smile playing at his lips. "Since you're so fond of alternative approaches, I thought you might appreciate a special challenge." He selected a single card from a separate pile and handed it to Elijah. This problem was featured in last year's International Mathematical Olympiad. Only 8 competitors worldwide solved it correctly. Elijah's heart sank as he read the card. It wasn't just difficult, it was deliberately chosen to be nearly impossible to solve without extensive preparation. The problem involved a complex integration requiring specialized techniques that weren't taught until advanced university courses. He glanced at Mr. Harrington, whose expression confirmed what Elijah already knew. This was no fair assessment. It was a public execution. "You have 15 minutes, Mr. Harrington announced, setting a timer on his phone with theatrical precision. "Standard methods only, please. We wouldn't want to confuse your teammates with any creative interpretations." Elijah turned to the whiteboard, marker trembling slightly in his hand. The fluorescent light seemed to intensify, beating down on him as he wrote out the problem. Behind him, he could hear whispers, the shuffling of papers, someone clearing their throat. He stared at the equation, mind racing through possible approaches. Every standard method he tried in his head led to computational nightmares or dead ends. 5 minutes passed. Elijah had written almost nothing on the board. "Having trouble, Mr. Chen?" Mr. Harrington's voice cut through the silence. "Perhaps this demonstrates the importance of mastering fundamentals before attempting to reinvent mathematics." A few nervous laughs rippled through the room. Elijah's face burned, but he kept his eyes fixed on the board. The standard approach wouldn't work, not in the time allowed. His own method could solve it, but using it meant defying Mr. Harrington directly, potentially losing his place on the team and the recommendation he desperately needed. 8 minutes. Sweat beaded on Elijah's forehead as he made another attempt, following the conventional path. The calculations quickly became unwieldy, filling a quarter of the board with a tangle of symbols that he knew wouldn't lead to a solution. 7 minutes remaining, Mr. Harrington announced, satisfaction evident in his tone. Elijah paused, marker hovering over the board. In his mind, he could see his father sitting at their kitchen table, shoulders slumped over yet another rejection letter. He thought of his mother's exhausted eyes after double shifts, of May asking in a small voice why they couldn't go back to their old house. The weight of their struggles pressed down on him, alongside the suffocating pressure of the silent room and Mr. Harrington's watchful gaze. 10 minutes gone. Elijah stood frozen before a board covered in conventional workings that led nowhere. Behind him, he heard someone whisper, "He's not going to make it." Something shifted inside him. A quiet clarity cut through the panic. What was he doing? Trying to solve an impossible problem with tools that weren't designed for it, just to please someone who had already decided he would fail. The realization washed over him like cold water. Elijah erased the board with 3 swift movements, ignoring the collective gasp from his peers. "Mr. Chen, what are you doing?" "You have less than 5 minutes remaining," Mr. Harrington said, alarm replacing his previous satisfaction. Elijah didn't respond. Instead, he began drawing a geometric representation of the problem, the foundation of his own method. His hand moved with newfound steadiness, mapping the equation into a visual framework that transformed the abstract mathematics into a pattern he could manipulate. The whispers behind him grew louder as students leaned forward, trying to understand what they were witnessing. "This is not the approved method," Mr. Harrington warned, stepping closer. "I specifically stated, I know what you stated," Elijah replied quietly, not turning around. "But this problem can't be solved efficiently using standard techniques." His marker continued moving, creating a structure of interconnected shapes and symbols that followed a logic entirely his own. Not in 15 minutes. Not by students at our level. The timer on Mr. Harrington's phone beeped just as Elijah wrote the final number of his solution. He stepped back from the board, heart pounding in his chest. The room had fallen into a stunned silence. On the whiteboard stood a solution, unlike anything they had seen before, elegant, concise, and completely unorthodox. Mr. Harrington stared at the board, his expression unreadable. "Time's up," he said finally, his voice strangely hollow. "And that is certainly not the method I taught in this class." "That's because no one taught me this method, Mr. Harrington." Elijah's voice was quiet but steady, carrying clearly through the silent classroom. "I developed it myself." Mr. Harrington's laugh was sharp and dismissive. "Developed it yourself? That's preposterous. You expect me to believe a high school student created a mathematical method that somehow escaped the notice of the entire mathematical community?" He turned to the other students, seeking allies in his ridicule. "This is exactly the kind of mathematical arrogance I was warning about." But the students weren't laughing. They were staring at the board with expressions ranging from confusion to dawning amazement. Zoe had pulled out her phone and was rapidly typing something, her brow furrowed in concentration. "It's wrong anyway," Mr. Harrington continued, approaching the board with a red marker. "The solution to this problem is—" He stopped abruptly, studying Elijah's work more carefully. His confidence faltered visibly as he traced the steps of Elijah's solution, trying to find the flaw in the logic. "The answer is correct," came a voice from the doorway. Everyone turned to see Dr. Patel, the head of Westridge's science department, standing there with an expression of intense interest. "Though I've never seen it derived quite like this before." Mr. Harrington's face tightened. "Eleanor, this doesn't concern—" "Actually, it does," Dr. Patel interrupted, walking into the room. She approached the board, eyes moving rapidly over Elijah's work. "I received a rather urgent text from one of your students." She nodded slightly toward Zoe. "She thought I might be interested in what was happening here." Dr. Patel turned to Elijah. "Would you mind explaining your approach, Mr. Chen?" The room held its breath as Elijah stepped forward, suddenly aware that this moment could change everything. He took a deep breath and pointed to the beginning of his solution. Traditional methods treat this as a complex integration problem requiring specialized techniques, he began, his voice gaining strength. But I realized it could be reframed as a geometric transformation. His hand moved across the board, highlighting key elements of his work. By mapping the equation onto a visual framework, patterns emerge that aren't obvious in the algebraic form. As Elijah continued his explanation, the initial skepticism on Dr. Patel's face gave way to genuine fascination. Even some of the other Math League students leaned forward, captivated by the elegance of the approach. Mr. Harrington remained silent, his expression hardening as he watched his authority in the room slipping away. The beauty of this method, Elijah continued, gaining confidence, is that it can be applied to entire classes of differential equations that are traditionally considered difficult or computationally intensive. He flipped open his notebook, revealing pages of similar work. I've been developing this approach for almost 2 years now, testing it against known problems and refining the visualization techniques. Dr. Patel took the notebook, turning pages with increasing interest. This is remarkable work, Elijah. Have you shown this to anyone else? Published anything? No, Elijah replied. I tried to discuss it with Mr. Harrington last year, but he said it was just creative doodling and that I should focus on mastering standard techniques first. A murmur ran through the room. Mr. Harrington's face flushed dark. Red, this is still highly irregular, he insisted, trying to regain control of the situation. Even if the answer is correct, using unvetted methods in a competitive setting, James, Dr. Patel cut in, her voice gentle but firm. The International Mathematical Olympiad problem you gave him specifically rewards creative approaches and novel insights. That's the entire point of the competition. She turned back to Elijah's work. And this is exactly the kind of thinking they're looking for. The realization rippled through the room. Mr. Harrington hadn't just given Elijah a difficult problem. He'd inadvertently handed him the perfect showcase for his unique abilities. May I? Dr. Patel asked, taking a marker from the tray. She wrote another equation on the board, one even more complex than the first. This was the final problem from this year's Princeton mathematics competition. The winning team took 12 minutes to solve it using conventional methods. She handed the marker to Elijah. Would your approach work here? The room fell completely silent. Even Mr. Harrington watched with reluctant attention as Elijah studied the new problem. After a moment, a small smile touched Elijah's lips. He began to draw, transforming the equation into his visual framework with confident strokes. The other students crowded closer, watching in fascination as the solution unfolded before them, clearer, more intuitive, and dramatically faster than anything they'd seen before. 3 minutes later, Elijah wrote the final answer and stepped back from the board. Dr. Patel checked the solution against something on her phone, then looked up with undisguised amazement. Correct. In 3 minutes, she turned to face the stunned room. What we're seeing here isn't just a clever trick or shortcut. This is a potentially groundbreaking approach to a whole class of mathematical problems. One of the senior Math League members whispered loudly enough for everyone to hear, "Holy shit! Chen just reinvented calculus." The words hung in the air as all eyes moved between Elijah's elegant solution on the board, Dr. Patel's astonished expression, and Mr. Harrington's increasingly pale face. In the space of 15 minutes, everything had changed. The boy who had been set up to fail had instead revealed himself as something none of them had expected, a genuine mathematical innovator. The following week transformed Elijah's life in ways he could never have imagined. Word of what happened in room 237 spread through Westridge High like wildfire, growing with each retelling until it reached almost mythic proportions. By Monday morning, students he'd never spoken to were stopping him in the hallways, asking about the Chen method and whether he could help them with their calculus homework. Dr. Patel had wasted no time. The morning after the Math League selection, she'd arranged a meeting with the principal and the district's STEM coordinator. By Friday, Elijah found himself in the university mathematics department 20 miles away, explaining his visualization approach to a panel of wide-eyed professors who interrupted each other with questions and exclamations. The applications for computational mathematics alone could be significant, one professor said, scribbling notes furiously. Have you considered how this might apply to machine learning algorithms? Or fluid dynamics, another added. The pattern recognition aspect could revolutionize how we model turbulence. Mr. Harrington was conspicuously absent from school for 2 days following the incident. When he returned, his usual commanding presence had diminished noticeably. In calculus class, he avoided looking directly at Elijah, focusing instead on delivering textbook lessons with mechanical precision. The dynamic had shifted irrevocably. Everyone felt it. On Wednesday, the principal made an announcement over the school intercom that sent a ripple of excitement through every classroom. Westridge High is proud to announce that senior Elijah Chen has been invited to present his original mathematical research at next month's National Youth Science Forum in Washington, D.C. His work, informally known as the Chen method, has attracted significant attention from the mathematical community. The school board has approved special funding to cover all expenses for this prestigious opportunity. Whispers and glances followed Elijah as he sat frozen in his seat, hardly believing what he was hearing. In the front of the room, Mr. Harrington stood with his back to the class, shoulders rigid. Marker pressed so hard against the whiteboard that the tip had flattened. After class, as Elijah gathered his books, Mr. Harrington approached his desk. The classroom had emptied quickly, leaving them alone in an uncomfortable silence. The Math League needs a team captain for the state competition, Mr. Harrington said stiffly, not quite meeting Elijah's eyes. The faculty advisors have unanimously recommended you for the position. Elijah looked up, surprised. All the faculty advisors? Mr. Harrington's jaw tightened. Yes, all of us. He hesitated, then added with visible effort, your approach to the IMO problem was unorthodox but effective. The team could benefit from that kind of thinking. It wasn't an apology, not even close, but it was an acknowledgement. Coming from Mr. Harrington, it felt monumental. That evening, Elijah arrived home to find his family gathered around their small kitchen table, which was covered with printouts of news articles and emails. His father looked up with tears in his eyes, holding a letter bearing the university's official letterhead. Dr. Patel called us this afternoon, his mother explained, her voice trembling with emotion. The university is offering you a full scholarship, Elijah. Full tuition, room and board, everything, and a special research position in their mathematics department. His father stood up, embracing Elijah tightly. They've also offered me a job, he whispered, in their engineering department. Dr. Patel showed them my previous work, and they had an opening for a research technician. He pulled back, his eyes shining. We're going to be okay, son. May bounced excitedly in her chair. Does this mean we can move back to a bigger apartment, one where Elijah doesn't have to sleep on the floor? Their mother laughed, wiping away tears. Yes, sweetheart, I think it does. Later that night, as his family celebrated around him, Elijah's phone buzzed with a text from Zoe. Check your email now. He opened his inbox to find a message from the organizers of the state mathematics competition. The subject line read, Urgent Special Invitation, Exhibition Demonstration of the Chen Method. The email explained that news of his innovative approach had reached the competition committee, who were offering him a special segment during the event to demonstrate his method to all participants. They were also increasing the first-place prize to $10,000 in recognition of exceptional mathematical innovation. As Elijah stared at the screen, another text from Zoe appeared. Heard Harrington has to introduce you at the ceremony. Justice is sweet. For the first time in years, Elijah felt the weight lifting from his shoulders. His family was safe. His future was secure. And the mathematics he developed in solitude, the work that had been dismissed as gibberish, was now being recognized for what it truly was, a breakthrough. 6 months later, Elijah stood at a podium in the university's grand lecture hall, looking out at a sea of faces. The National Mathematics Conference had dedicated an entire session to the Chen method and its applications, a surreal honor for someone who had just finished high school 3 weeks earlier. In the front row sat his family, his father in a new suit, now employed as a research technician, his mother, who had reduced her hours at the hospital to pursue her own long-deferred nursing degree, and May, beaming with pride, wearing a T-shirt that read, "My brother reinvented math." "Many people have asked me how I developed this approach," Elijah began, his voice steady and confident in a way that would have been unimaginable to him a year ago. "The truth is, it came from necessity. When you don't have the resources others take for granted, when you're solving problems on the floor of a one-bedroom apartment after everyone's asleep, you learn to find different paths." From his vantage point, Elijah could see Dr. Patel nodding encouragingly from the side of the stage. In the middle of the audience sat Zoe and several other members of the Math League team, who had traveled 2 hours to support him. And in the back row, partially obscured but unmistakable, was Mr. Harrington, attending voluntarily, his expression a complex mixture of reluctant respect and lingering discomfort. "The Chen method isn't just about mathematics," Elijah continued. "It's about seeing patterns where others see only complexity. It's about trusting your own perspective, even when authority figures tell you it's wrong." He paused, making brief eye contact with Mr. Harrington. "Sometimes the most valuable insights come from those who haven't been taught what's supposedly impossible." After the presentation, as attendees crowded around with questions and congratulations, Elijah noticed a quiet figure waiting at the edge of the group. When the crowd finally thinned, Mr. Harrington approached, holding a copy of the conference program. "That was illuminating," he said, the words clearly difficult for him. "Your explanation of the topological aspects was particularly clear." Elijah nodded, accepting the olive branch for what it was. "Thank you for coming, Mr. Harrington." The teacher hesitated, then added, "The university has asked me to help integrate elements of your method into their freshman calculus curriculum." A hint of his old authority returned as he straightened his tie. "I'll be ensuring the implementation maintains proper mathematical rigor, of course." "Of course," Elijah replied, suppressing a smile. Some things would never change completely, and that was okay. Later that evening, as the Chen family celebrated at a restaurant they could never have afforded a year earlier, Elijah's father raised his glass in a toast. "To my son, who reminded me of something I had forgotten," he said, his voice thick with emotion. "That sometimes, when all the conventional paths are blocked, the only way forward is to create your own." The following fall, Elijah began his studies at the university with a dual appointment as a student and research assistant. The small office they provided him overlooked the mathematics building where, 3 times a week, Mr. Harrington now taught a special seminar on innovative approaches to calculus. Life had come full circle in ways neither of them could have predicted. On the wall of Elijah's new office hung a framed copy of that first impossible equation, the one Mr. Harrington had intended as his downfall. Beside it was a simple quote Elijah had written himself, words that had become something of a personal mantra. "The most powerful solutions often come from those who weren't given the luxury of following the standard path. Don't just think outside the box. Realize that sometimes the box itself is the limitation." In the years that followed, as the Chen method found applications in fields ranging from quantum computing to climate modeling, Elijah never forgot the lesson of that humiliating day in calculus class. True innovation rarely comes from those at the center of power and privilege. It emerges from the margins, from the underdogs and outsiders who see differently because they must, who solve problems in new ways because the old ways were never designed for them. And sometimes, the greatest gift we can offer the world is the courage to trust our own unique vision, even when everyone else tells us it's just gibberish.